Welcome back to another episode of Murderous Minors, Killer Kids. This episode is brought to you by the State of Logic podcast. Episode number 15. Oh Brother. Part 1. Aza Vidinhar. Little boys tend to idolize their big brothers if they have one. Older brothers are well known to provide services like noogies, parent-friendly alibis, old t-shirts, and music recommendations, help with homework, hair ruffling, and advice about girls can be bonuses if you aren't too pesky or embarrassing. That's what brotherly love should be. A pseudo-father figure without the expectations. A friend who is really experiencing your whole life with you. Sometimes, unfortunately, psychological disturbance or exposure to trauma can lead a child to act out in rage. Rage taken out on some of the people closest to them. In West Point, Utah, Aza Vidinhar was living a relatively quiet life with his family. One of two biological children in a family with 6 kids, Aza was homeschooled but also a registered freshman at West Point Junior High. There, he was an honor student and ran track for the school. Younger brother Alex had been adopted at birth, while little Benji had joined the family more recently, with his 2 sisters, one younger, one older. Running was evidently a family affair, as a Google search of his name unearths digital running logs made by his father, Lamond, an engineer in the United States Air Force. He proudly chronicled the mileage they logged throughout 2013. Aza was described by neighbors and peers as socially awkward and quiet. Different is often seen, as well as his speech impediment being mentioned. Back in 2011, he had been the subject of a citywide search after being reported missing by his parents. He was found later that night inside of a Wendy's restaurant. Following this run-of-the-mill family crisis, the Vidinhars sought counsel and guidance from within their church community. Leadership intervened, however, it did not appear that any further assistance was sought from law enforcement or family services. Fast forward to May 2013, and Aza's mother left him to babysit younger brothers, 4-year-old Benji and 10-year-old Alex, while she took some of the other kids to a dance recital. She returned home to a nightmarish scene. Mrs. Vidinhar located her 4-year-old son, Benji. He was dead. Nowhere in sight were 2 of her other sons, 10-year-old Alex and 15-year-old Aza. When police arrived on scene, officers searched the home, locating the body of Alex. He too is dead. The only pieces missing from this gruesome puzzle were the whereabouts of Aza and the identity of the killer. Officers went on to locate Aza Vidinhar wandering and bloodied around midnight. His family no longer had to fear that he too had been a victim or that he had been abducted. Instead, they had to grapple with the fact that their biological son may have perpetrated these crimes against their adopted sons.
A West Point family torn apart. 2 brothers murdered. Their older brother, now in custody, he is the lone suspect in their deaths.
The Davis County Sheriff says the 2 brothers were found in separate rooms, and the 15-year-old, of course, fled the scene. He was arrested in Layton early this morning.
After further investigation, it was determined that this was a homicide. Detectives worked on it throughout the day yesterday, and then yesterday evening charged the brother of the victim.
Although officers did not disclose exactly what he said, they did state that he spoke in a blunt and direct manner about his role in his brother's deaths. Lamond Vidinhar immediately traveled back from his military duties in Alabama. Attorneys Todd Utzinger and Todd Sessions waived the preliminary hearing in mid-July 2013, choosing instead to focus all time and energy into preparing for certification hearings, which would determine whether juvenile or adult court would see this case. Defense attorneys conceded that enough evidence existed to ensure that the case would be bound over for trial, deeming the hearing unnecessary and not the best use of the court's time. Following the murders, Aza's father, Aza Vidinhar, stated that emotional and behavioral issues had some influence in the stabbings. He also said that, "I understand that there must be justice, but life without parole would be way too harsh for a 15-year-old with no previous criminal history." In October 2013, Aza's attorney Todd Utzinger filed a motion to suppress all statements made to the Davis County Sheriff's Office. After being read his Miranda rights twice, it seemed evident that Aza did not want to speak to officers, however the questioning continued. The prosecution also filed a motion to suppress, saying Aza's constitutional right to due process was violated. Aza had repeatedly told the 4 detectives present that he just wanted to go to sleep. He dozed off multiple times, however the officers woke him each time and continued the interrogation. In November 2013, the teen's statements to police were ruled inadmissible in court, and the wait for the certification hearing continued. It was scheduled to begin May 21, 2014, 1 day shy of the 1-year anniversary of the murders. Evidence was presented to Judge Janice Ford to determine whether Aza should be certified to stand trial as an adult. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree felony murder. Aza's attorneys believed that his young age and lack of a previous criminal history made him amenable to rehabilitation within the juvenile system. Ultimately, Aza took a plea. He did not want to put his parents through the certification hearings, which would detail all evidence, forensic, and psychological assessment results in court. On June 18, 2014, a now 16-year-old Aza Vidinhar pled guilty to stabbing his 10-year-old brother Alex to death 1 year before. This plea was entered in the 2nd District Juvenile Court. His guilty plea for killing his 4-year-old brother Benji was entered the same day, but in the adult division of the court. The plea agreement allowed for Aza to remain in the custody of juvenile corrections until the age of 21. However, at any time they could relinquish custody of him to adult court. The sustainability of his juvenile sentence would lie almost solely in Aza's hands, and Judge Frost made sure to tell him to behave. Judge David Hamilton sentenced Aza to 15 years to life for Benji's stabbing death to begin once he came of age, and was released to the Utah State Prison. He found the plea agreement satisfactory to the needs of the juvenile offender as well as to the public. Aza's parents were present at both hearings that day, as you would expect, and were understandably emotional. Regardless of what the outcome was, Aza's attorneys pointed out, there could be no justice for this family. A few months later, on November 13, 2014, Aza was booked on a 3rd-degree assault by an inmate charge at Weber County Jail without bail. The arrest was the result of an incident at Mill Creek Detention Facility where Aza was serving out his juvenile sentence. He reportedly used the handle of a broom to attack another juvenile inmate who did not fight back. It soon became evident that the teen suffered from some type of psychological issue. His new attorney, James Redelick, requested a mental competency hearing to be scheduled on the fresh assault charge. He reported that Aza had difficulty focusing on what was being said to him, and that he often had a dazed, foggy look in his eyes. The defense did admit that about $30,000 had already been utilized to determine Aza's mental competency as he prepared for trial, but that his psychological state had deteriorated to the point that further evaluation was needed. A now 17-year-old Aza was sentenced to up to 5 years for the assault charge. then was formally sentenced to 15 years to life in adult prison as per his plea agreement.
On May 22nd, 2013, the defendant stabbed his two younger brothers, ages 10 and 4 at the time. Alexander suffered 88 stab wounds to his body. Benjamin suffered 28 stab wounds. Over and over again, he indicates that he doesn't really care how his crimes have affected others.
I don't think any 17-year-old ought to be in the prison. The difficulty that the judge is in and the system is in is there's no realistic alternative when somebody's acting out violently.
Because of Vidinhar's young age, the state made an unusual plea deal. Vidinhar originally pleaded guilty to his 10-year-old brother's murder in juvenile court, allowing Vidinhar to stay in the juvenile system through the age of 21 and not be sentenced for his younger brother's death until he was released. But last November, that deal unraveled.
He stated he would have killed him if he would have had enough time.
Vidinhar attacked another juvenile inmate at the Mill Creek detention facility with a broom. He later pled guilty to a third-degree felony, assault by a prisoner, and was sentenced up to 5 years in adult prison. That forced the state to sentence Vidinhar for the other murder. Vidinhar's attorney says the past 2 years have been tragic for the family.
They're devastated. They've been devastated from the beginning, but they've got to piece their lives together as best they can.
Vidinhar's attorney says it's likely the teen won't see the Board of Pardons for 20 years, but he hopes they see him sooner due to his young age.
Although no motive was ever publicly released, it did appear that at some point, perhaps in those inadmissible statements, it was mentioned that Aza had been angry that his younger brothers had the TV volume up too loud. The following is a clip of an interview with Benji's birth mother, Alice Soto. The Vidinhars adopted 3 of her children about 2 years before Alex and Benji's murders.
It's kind of an awkward story because the 4-year-old Benji is my biological son. The reason why they were adopted was because I was on drugs at the time. She adopted 3 of my children. There was a 4-year-old, a brand new baby, and Benji that was a year and a half. I don't know, it was supposed to have been an open adoption, but I chose not to associate because after the adoption, I fell off the wagon and I even went harder into drugs. Yeah, I gave up. I gave up everything and I just didn't care. July 14th of 2011 was when I got arrested. And I was put in jail for 180 days, so that's 6 months. I contacted my caseworker and I told her, I go, well, I'm clean and sober now. I just had a brand new baby. That's when my 20-month-old, I just had him and I told her about him. And then I asked her if she would ask the family if I could get updates on the kids, just some pictures of how they were doing. And so my caseworker was like, we can do that. And so I got pictures. They sent pictures to me of all the kids, of how they were doing and everything. They looked very happy. It was just nice to see my kids are doing well. I was following the update about the 2 boys. I was like, how horrible can his parents be? So I followed it and followed it and followed it. And then 1 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting on my phone because I was waiting for my roommate to get home. I was on my phone just scrolling through it and the link to my Facebook, and it showed the pictures of the boys. And I looked, and I kept looking. I was like, this can't be. And I went upstairs, and I grabbed my pictures, and I put the pictures together on Facebook, and I noticed it was my son. And I just broke down, screaming, crying. I had to call my family over, and I was like, you guys need to get here now. There's something that's really horrible that just happened. And so they got here, and I explained it to my aunt. And she goes, are you sure that's are you sure it's your son? I go, look, I got the pictures. I go, it's got to be him. I contacted the caseworker. I contacted Davis County. They said it was Davis County that was doing the investigation. I tried contacting them. I tried contacting everybody to find out what was going on. And I didn't get nothing. And so I was like, well, I guess they're going to just shut me off from the world. And the only thing I really, really wanted, it wasn't like I wanted to be involved in the case. I just wanted to know where Benji was going to be either buried or where his location was going to be, so I can have my closure. I don't blame the family for what they did. I look at it as that she's trying to protect herself because she